Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Kushagra and I have some updates for all those anxious students regarding CLAT 2021. So yesterday the CLAT consortium released a statement that they will be reviewing the situation of COVID-19 in the country in the first week of May. So for all those who think or regarding the speculation that the exam might get postponed, all of that will be answered by the end of first week of May. That is the timeline that they have set up to review the situation. So wait for that. Till then, I suggest all of you to not get indulged in such speculations. Focus on what is important for you. Focus on your preparation. Don't worry about these decisions. These decisions are anyway beyond your reach. So don't focus on any of this. All right. So moving on, yesterday some of you had doubts regarding, a lot of students have been asking how much should CLAT 2022 aspirants be focusing on the newspaper and general knowledge preparation. So addressing their concerns, I suggest that a lot of things that we are discussing right now are also things that will carry forward later on. So for example, COVID-19, for example, health infrastructure, policies, relationship between India and Russia, or the Iran nuclear deal. Some things, these news have been part of our concern for a long time period and not just one examination cycle related to Afghanistan. So incidents that we have been talking about for the past 1 week are legacy issues. Therefore, my advice to those students who are preparing for CLAT 2022 is that you should watch the series because it gets you consistency towards the preparation, which is the most important thing going ahead. On that note, let's begin with today's newspaper. So the government of India announced yesterday that from May 1st, three things can be done. One, the government has given up control over the purchase of vaccines. Now, state governments can also, based on their needs and demand, purchase directly from the manufacturers. Secondly, vaccines will be available to all those above the age of 18 from May 1st. That is, now the limitation that was up till age of 45 is being done away with. And thirdly, manufacturers must sell 50% directly to the center. So they can sell it directly to the central government, but can also set up price for open market. That is, so limitation on manufacturers, limitation on people who want to get vaccinated, and limitation on states have finally been done away with. Things that different state governments had been asking, because during the meeting with the Prime Minister, different chief ministers talked about how they want to vaccinate how many people. And on that basis, now the central government has given up control. In that regard, based on the situation of COVID-19 in the country, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has cancelled his visit and it will now happen virtually. Earlier, because of COVID-19, he had cancelled his visit to the Republic Day parade when the COVID situation in United Kingdom was problematic. Now it is in India. Therefore, the virtual summit will go ahead and the physical one has been called off. And based on the COVID situation, India has been placed on travel red list. That is, countries have asked their citizens to prepare or be cautious while traveling to India based on the different strains and the situation of the pandemic in India right now. Certain countries have also banned direct flights from India. Then moving on the other national news, more as lockdown have been imposed, migrant workers are returning back to their homelands, and at the same time, different crematories and burial grounds are running out of space to bury the dead or to burn the bodies of those who have passed away because of COVID-19. Such is the state of the pandemic right now in the country. And moving on with the other national news, also more and more about COVID-19 surge. Almost every state is reporting higher number of cases now. In that light, the situation is tense. Therefore, I suggest all of you should take all the precautions, and in response to shortage of oxygen, the railway yesterday flagged off its first oxygen train. So the first oxygen is a roll-on rail-off train carrying empty truck tankers on board left Kalamboli goods yard around 8 p.m. for Visakhapatnam, from where it will be filled with oxygen and then supplied to different areas. So these oxygen trains will be running on green corridors, which will be streamlined. That is, these trains will get priority treatment on the railway tracks. Then moving on, apart from this, turning to the editorial front. So on the main editorial, protecting children in the age of AI, that artificial intelligence now is the most important, is something that surrounds children at the earliest age until their adolescence. And what this calls for is, one, to tell children, one, not to get addicted. So how can you address that? Secondly, how to ensure parents are made aware about all of this, and at the same time to help their children understand what artificial intelligence is doing, because the idea of different apps is to suck you into the information they are providing. They believe they are the end all of the goal, and therefore the purpose of artificial intelligence is not primarily for utility but also consumption. And then therefore at this point of time, rights and protection of such become important. One, against addiction. Secondly, regarding the data coding biases, that different tools can have biases towards different kinds of things, how you enter, what they see. So protection against that. Now this is once again a policy related document. Editorial does not relevant for you all. Then on the left hand side, saving lives, India must quickly improve health facilities to be able to prevent deaths. This is one, criticizing the government for not establishing permanent facilities after the first COVID wave. So during first wave of COVID-19 that hit its peak in mid-September, the facilities that were set up were shut down because they were temporary in their structure. Now, the concerns of them have followed up right now, and therefore once again we are setting up temporary facilities. So the editorial makes a call that we should come up with permanent healthcare facilities which have a lasting effect and address these ad hoc measures. At the same time, it also raises the concern about the rush to recover remdesivir as a drug, that it is being seen as a Ramban or one drug for all solutions. Now, one, there is no enough proof about the drug being able to address those or reduce the recovery time period. The success story of the drug is limited to those who are suffering from moderate illness of COVID-19. So that is one thing, another thing that the editorial addresses. Then moving on the left hand side, vulnerability reminder. Now this editorial is in light of the approval of extradition of Nirav Modi back to India, which is the online fraud that he carried out on the Punjab National Bank. So this raises another concern that, see, in India in the past 1 year, the total volume of online banking frauds has risen multiple times, that is by 2.5%, and in total volume it has increased by 30%, which is now stands at 1.85 lakh. So what needs to be done is not after the fraud is found out recover money, but to prevent this from taking place at the first instance, which is to strengthen the banking system. Now, why it becomes even more important is because Government of India is now in the stage of compiling and consolidating the public sector banks into one large public sector banks. The reduction and merger of public sector banks have been taking place, and larger intervention of the private sector. It is in this light that it becomes important to have better infrastructure to address these banking frauds overall. So which is the editorial's need. Then on the right hand side is the most important one for the day. It relates to the power of ordinance making of central and state governments. Now, a question for all of you for the comment section. This is something we have asked before also. Which are the two articles that talk about ordinance making power of the central government and the state government? I want all of you to go through the videos again or see how much consistently you have been following the series. So the two articles which talk about the ordinance making power, I want you all to put it in the comment section which they are. Now, what is the editorial talking about? It is talking about the power of promulgation and re-promulgation of ordinances. We have done multiple in-depth analysis about ordinance making powers. Ordinance making power, the exceptional power that is, instead of legislature, the executive makes the law. Now, and these ordinances have a specific shelf life, that is 6 months is the maximum time period between two sessions of the parliament. They have to be put before parliament, and once parliament convenes, 6 weeks is the time period in which they should be tabled before the parliament and get approved. Now this is talking about how governments let the ordinance expire by not tabling it before the house and then re-promulgate it once the session ends. This is something that the editorial highlights, and then talks about two judgments of the Supreme Court. The first is a 1980 judgment of the Supreme Court which talks about it would certainly be a colorable exercise of power of the government to ignore the legislature and re-promulgate the ordinance and thus continue to regulate the life and liberty of the citizens through ordinance made by executive. Now, what is colorable legislation? Something that you cannot do directly, you cannot do indirectly. So executive is not the body that can make laws, but through re-promulgation of ordinances, executive gets that power. So this is what the judgment highlights. The second is a very recent judgment of the Supreme Court, that is 2017, that re-promulgation of ordinances is a fraud on the constitution and subversion of democratic legislative process. That this is something that should not be done. Now, why is this being highlighted right now? Is because recently a Commission for Air Quality Management in Capital Region and Adjoining Area Ordinance. This was created after the Supreme Court asked the government to formulate a body for addressing pollution concerns in the NCR region. When the Parliament was in session, there was a report about how the bill has not been tabled. The members of the Commission also asked the government to do so, but this was not done. But now, once the session is over, another ordinance to recreate the session commission has been done. It is in light of this that this re-promulgation of ordinance as an abuse of constitutional power is being highlighted. So once again, let me know in the comment section the two articles that talk about this power, separate articles, one for central government, the other for state governments. All right. Then moving on the op-ed page, on the right hand side, sharing the burden of care, the load on tertiary health sector health services during pandemic can be reduced by strengthening community health centers. Now, this is talking about how we can improve our health facilities and reduce the burden, and also talks about how private sector has more or less failed to do it, because most of the facilities for COVID care is also now on the government and the public healthcare facilities and not private sector healthcare facilities. The criticism is also not on private sector that why didn't it do it? The concern is with the government. So this editorial highlights that. Then on the left hand side becomes more important for us, which is India and Russia look for a reset. Now, what is this talking about? This is in response to the recent foreign visit of Foreign Minister of Russia. Now, in that, differences between India and Russia were highlighted, but at the same time, we need some context that is, despite India diversifying to other places to purchase their weapons, still Russia is the biggest source of weapons for India, that is 49%. The second country is 6% for us, which is France, which is 18%. All right. The second thing is, at the same time, Russia is also the country which we need for autonomy purposes, for our own autonomous relationship. That is, we should not be seen as a part of any one camp. At the same time, Russia has been growing closer and closer to Pakistan and China, two adversaries of India. It is in this light that last year, that is 2020, after 20 years, for the first time, a summit level meeting between Russia and India did not take place. This highlights how the relationship between Russia and India, who have been naturally considered close allies, has been taking a downward trend. So this editorial talks about that and how they are getting closer to Pakistan and China. But still, it does not mean India has completely ignored the concerns of Russia. Then moving on, a huge costly mistake. This is talking about the Ken-Betwa river linking project. So what is the purpose of the project? The project is between Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and the central government. It will be a central project and categorized as a national project. So central government will contribute 90% of the cost. It will take 8 years. The purpose is to connect the two rivers and provide water facility to the Bundelkhand region of the country. Now, what are the concerns with this is the Panna National Wildlife Sanctuary, which will get submerged. 70%, 60% of the wildlife sanctuary plus approximately 90,000 hectares of forest land, along with the area which is a population, which is a habitat for tigers and vultures, which will get submerged because of this, and a total of 7.2 lakh trees. At the time when country is trying to increase its afforestation rate and address desertification by planting more trees, to submerge it by doing it one is considered a problematic measure. At the same time, the second thing is also how the benefit of this project in itself is something that can be seen as a problematic. Why? Because there are other measures which the editorial talks about that states that internal protection of water conservation, that is rainwater harvesting and other catchment area and pond creation, which could protect rainwater and reduce water consumption in general, could be done to reduce this situation. However, they have been ignored for the project. However, the project still needs central empowered committees approval for it to go ahead. So that needs to be seen. The project in itself becomes important for you all to be noted down. Then the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha has become the first party to declare the name of electoral bonds donor, the first party in the entire country to do so. However, during the declaration also, the party has been unable to find out the original person who donated it, which goes back to the recent Supreme Court hearing, which talked about how country parties or even individuals cannot find out the original donor, which is a problem, and which is the problem of transparency with electoral bonds. So related to electoral bonds, another thing that you now need to add is that JMM, Jharkhand Mukti Morcha, which is the ruling party in the state of Jharkhand, has become the first party to declare details of their electoral bonds donor. Then moving on, India will be receiving more Rafale fighter jets, and they will be flagged off by Air Chief Marshal RKS Bhattacharya, who will be on a 5-day visit to France, where these jets will be. India has already inducted 14 out of 36 of these jets. Then the Vande Bharat scheme, which was to repatriate Indians out of countries who were stuck during lockdowns of COVID-19 and carry people who are stuck in India to their country, has now become in its 10th phase the largest evacuation exercise by airlifting more than 110,000 people, something that India did in 1990. So the scheme has become the largest airlifting exercise by the Indian government. So that is something that you need to note down. It started last year from May 7, once the lockdown, certain relief under the national lockdown was provided. Then moving on the other national news, more about campaignings. Finally, the Bharatiya Janata Party has become the last main political party in West Bengal to announce restrictions on its overall campaign rallies, limiting it to 500 people in all. And our former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has tested positive for COVID-19 and has been admitted to AIIMS. So we hope for speedy recovery of him from the virus. Then moving on the international news, one big space endeavor that NASA has concluded is to fly the Ingenuity helicopter on Mars. Ingenuity has become the first earthly object to fly on another terrestrial body. 1.8 kilogram rotorcraft lifted off from Martian surface, flew for 39.1 seconds, reached the height of 10 feet above the Martian surface. The helicopter was being controlled by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, and the overall distance between the controller and where the flight took place was 278 million kilometers from Earth, which shows the technology that NASA has been able to establish to control an aircraft that far away. It is being called the Wright brothers moment in space exploration. The Wright brothers were the first one to fly an object on Earth, a feat they achieved in 1903. A shred of fabric from that 1903 first flight of humans was also tucked inside Ingenuity to mark that this will be the first object to do it on another planet. Now, Ingenuity was part of the Perseverance rover of NASA, which landed on Martian surface in February 18. Ingenuity is not part of the scientific experiments that Perseverance will be taking up. It was part of testing the technology of flying another object on another surface, and at the same time also to test how much distance we could do or how much time it will take to control such a technology. Alright, so this is one scientific news that you really need to be noting it down. Then moving on, other news from world. First about Alexei Navalny. He has been moved to a prison hospital after outcries that he may pass away. And then on Cuba side, Cuba gets a new leader. This is something we have talked about, that Miguel Diaz-Canel will now be taking over from Raul Castro, the brother of Fidel Castro. This will be the first time a civilian leader for the communist country. Then, apart from this, Joe Biden, the US president, will be hosting the climate summit on 23rd and 24th April. So we'll be talking about that. However, prior to that, he has pushed the bar for climate change in US, setting up a timetable that is 50% more advanced than the one that he had proposed earlier, which is to cut down 50% of the carbon emissions by 2030 itself for United States. United States being the second largest emitter of carbon emissions in the world. Therefore, this is a big step towards protecting Earth's temperature from rising. Then moving on, Russia's Iran nuclear talks enter drafting stage. This is that whether the deal to save the JCPOA will be back or not, that is something that needs to be seen. The hope is it will be. We need to keep our fingers crossed. Then moving on the left hand side, Saudi activist wins top Europe's Rights Award. That is, Login Al-Hatlol has been awarded the Volkov Havel Human Rights Prize, a top European rights award for her fight for women's rights in Saudi Arabia. Now, she's been under detention since 2018 and cannot travel for next 5 years. So that is a travel embargo on her. She was instrumental in getting the ban on driving on Saudi women revoked. It was her campaigning that got it done for Saudi women. And then apart from this, radical Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, a political party which has been banned because of its anti-France protest, has released police hostages, something that they had held, in light of which it was banned. So that protest keeps going on. And then on the right hand side, there is a report that has been published about the French government enabling the 1994 Rwandan genocide. The One of the biggest genocide post the World War II took place in Rwanda. Approximately 8 lakh Houthis were slaughtered in 1994 under this. The French government knew that this could be happening and yet didn't do anything, which this new report talks about. Then moving on the other economic side, nothing of real note for us. On the sporting front, the Indian Open badminton tournament has been postponed, which was due to be held from May 11 to 16. This was important for qualification and preparation of Indian athletes for the Tokyo Olympics, and it was an important event, but in light of COVID situation in Delhi, it has now been postponed. At the same time, ICC has confirmed that the World Test Championship final will go ahead between India and New Zealand, which is due on June 18. It is in light of why it is in news, because India has been placed under red list for COVID-19 surge in India. Then there is a story developing in Europe, which is about UEFA in crisis mode. 12 clubs across Europe have decided to break away and formulate a new Super League for themselves. Now we need to wait for this story to develop further to discuss it on our own. On that note, I will conclude for the day. Take care, all of you. It is very important that you take all the precautions and wait for May 1st week to conclude for CLAT consortium to tell you how things will be decided. On that note, take care of yourselves and I'll see you all tomorrow.